Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of Game 7 of the World Championship match between the champion Magnus Carlsen and the challenger Sergey Karjakin. Game 7 played on Sunday the 20th of November. The score after 6 games was 3-3, we had 6 draws, and in Game 7 Karjakin was white, Carlsen was black. The game started with a surprise, d2, d4. First time that Karjakin played the d-pawn in this match. The first 3 games as white he had played e2, e4. Carlsen didn't seem too shocked, he immediately replied with d5, and after c4, c6 we have the Slav defense. Carlsen hadn't played the Slav for the last 2 years, so that must have come as a slight surprise to Karjakin, who later said in the press conference that he didn't know this variation very well, the variation that comes on the board. Knight c3, knight f6, e3, and Carlsen decides to play the Chebanenko Slav, named after a Moldovan grandmaster. Bishop d3, Carlsen took on c4, bishop takes back, and e6. Knight f3, c5, castling, b5 hitting the bishop, bishop goes back to e2, bishop b7, nice diagonal for that black queen's bishop, and Karjakin took in on c5. Now the most common moves are taking on d1 or taking on c5, but Carlsen played a move that also is very logical, but that had only been played 4 times in history. So it was a surprise to Karjakin, who now thought for 10 minutes, and he came up with the not very ambitious knight f3 to d2. Carlsen took the pawn, and here Karjakin said in the press conference afterwards that he had to change plan. He had planned knight b3, but then saw that after bishop d6 the position is not very good for white. Fortunately he saw another option at this moment. He played knight d to e4. As he said, not very ambitious, but what can you do, Karjakin said. And after knight takes, bishop e7, that bishop was hit by the knight. Black is already slightly better. He is ahead in development, the bishop on c1 is still at home, and we're only on move 13. But it's already slightly preferable to have black here. b3 to develop the bishop on c1, and knight b4. A good move, opening the bishop on b7 and looking at some nice squares on c2 and d3 for the knight. Bishop f3 to protect the knight, and Carlsen completes his development by castling. Black is fully comfortable, as I said, and after 15 moves Carlsen must have been very happy with how the opening went for him. Bishop a3, and now, as Grandmaster Peter Svidler said in the studio, black has the choice to have a day off by allowing white to take on b4, and then we'll get an opposite bishop ending. What Svidler meant was that if, for example, let's make a move for black g6, then white can take on b4, bishop takes, knight f6 check, which is always a motive in this position. We'll see it in the game as well. Queen takes, bishop takes b7, rook a d8, queen f3, queen takes, bishop takes, and we have this opposite color bishop and rooks ending that Svidler was talking about, with a very symmetrical pawn structure, and this is indeed completely equal. But Carlsen committed a blunder, as he said himself. Not a blunder with many consequences. The only thing is that from a slightly better game he now had a slightly worse game, and he had to defend, he had to do some work. He played rook c8. He said afterwards that he had been calculating a number of variations involving knight f6 check, and that he had missed something. Rook b8 would have been a better move, and then position is also equal, but black is probably slightly more comfortable. But after rook c8, Karjakin played knight f6 check, and bishop takes f6, bishop takes b7, hitting the rook and hitting the pawn, and Carlsen took on a1, Karjakin took on b4. It's easy to miss something, there's so many capturing moves in all these variations. But Carlsen here found the best defense. He gave up a pawn. He didn't have to give away a pawn. He can take on d1, rook takes d1, rook b8, bishop takes f8, rook takes b7, bishop b4, bishop f6, and rook c1, which is an important move. But then black will be suffering. Rook c6 is coming, the pawn on a6 is eternally weak, and he will be suffering. So Carlsen saw a better way to go to achieve a draw. He decided to give up a pawn with bishop f6, bishop takes f8, queen takes d1, rook takes back, rook takes f8, bishop takes a6, there goes the pawn, and now an important move, b4, to make sure that white's extra pawn is on a2, and that is not a very strong extra pawn. And of course we also have the bishops of opposite color. So Carlsen deliberately sacrificed a pawn to achieve this ending, which he had judged as equal, and he was right. The game moved on like this, rook c1. Carlsen played g6. He has to make some accurate moves to achieve the draw, but he confidently did that. Please note that you cannot play bishop c3 here, because then there's a2, a4. That a2 pawn is now suddenly on a4, and as Karjakin said afterwards, white is probably winning here, because you cannot take the pawn because of rook takes c3. Of course Carlsen did not fall for that. As I said, he played g6, rook c2, rook a8, bishop d3, rook d8, bishop e2, king f8, king f1, rook a8, bishop c4, rook c8, pinning the bishop, king e2, king e7, f4, h6, king f3, rook c7, g4, g5, king e4, and Carlsen thought that all his pieces were now in the ideal position, and he just played rook c8, and Karjakin thought for a while but saw that he could not improve his position any further. Black has a fortress, and that pawn on a2, which is white's trump card, which is the extra pawn, is not going anywhere. He's not able to play that pawn up the board and create any threats, any difficulties for black. So here both players agreed a draw. And these are some sound bites from the press conference afterwards. Karjakin said, after 16 rook c8, 17 knight f6 check, I have a better ending. Black's bishop f6 is a good move to achieve the draw. At the end, I could not improve my position any further. Black has a fortress. He was also asked, both players were asked how to handle stress. Karjakin's answer was, I go for walks with my team. Carlsen said, the opening was quiet, but I made a blunder. I was looking at different variations with knight f6 check and made a mistake. It was not necessary to give up a pawn, but fortunately there are enough resources in my position to hold. Now we have a 5-game match and it's very interesting. The results of these last 2 games have been decent for me. How to handle stress? Get enough physical and mental rest. So some advice from the strongest players in the world on how to handle stress when playing chess. Hope you liked this coverage of Game 7. 5 more games to go. The score is 3.5, 3.5. Carlsen has white in Game 8. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel, and you can leave a comment if you want. This is Rick from Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.